Mizuno has just dropped the new JPX 925 Hot Metal Pro, and Hot Metal HL. And in this video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about them. Now, most people, when they think about Mizuno irons, think about things like the Mizuno Pro, the 241s, the 243s, irons that are traditional muscle back blades or are better player cavity back irons that are designed for the game's best players. They put the biggest emphasis on feel, on control. Mizuno has really been using the JPX family for several years to blend multi-material constructions with its classic shape. And so that's going to continue with the JPX Hot Metal 925. And what's really interesting is that within the JPX 925 Hot Metal family, with 3 irons in that family, Mizuno designers were able to create distinct irons, clubs that were made for different types of players, but they blend together really easily. And since each one of these clubs is going to retail for $150 each, consumers working with good custom fitters should be able to mix and match them to create blended sets very easily. Now, while the Mizuno Pro irons are forged, the JPX 925 Hot Metal irons are all cast using a very unique material. It's a nickel chromoly alloy. And what the advantage of going with nickel chromoly is it is extremely strong, extremely hard. And so in strategic areas, Mizuno is able to make these irons very, very thin to save weight. Specifically, Mizuno has redesigned its face to be much thinner across a broader area of the hitting surface. So while the exact center, the ideal hitting area, is a little bit thicker, which enhances feel and sort of controls ball speed, a much larger area of the hitting surface is now going to be exceptionally thin. We're talking down to 1.2 millimeters in some of the perimeter areas. And by making the face itself thinner, a greater portion of it is going to be able to flex at the moment of impact to create a broader sweet spot. Now, to enhance that sweet spot even more, Mizuno was able to thin out the very leading edge portion here, which traditionally acts almost like a hinge. And so by thinning this area here, the entire hitting surface will bend back a lot more efficiently at the moment of impact. So the metal itself wants to bend, and the whole design of the face and the hitting area wants to bend almost like a springboard as well. So the sweet spot across the JPX 925 irons has been really enlarged, so you're going to get better ball speed protection on miss hits and better overall performance. To help golfers harness that ball speed and to make the long irons a little bit easier to hit, the JPX 925 Hot Metal irons all have a slug of tungsten that runs as a bar low in the 4-iron through the 7-iron. And what that does is to help to lower the center of gravity, and that creates a higher initial launch angle. So while you're getting more ball speed on the long irons, which usually are the most challenging to hit, the clubs want to get the ball up in the air a little bit more easily. And for players who have a handicap of, say, 8 or 10 and higher, that's almost always going to be a good thing. Now, for years, Mizuno has prided the way that the irons that it creates sound at the moment of impact. And to make sure that the JPX 925s continue that tradition, a series of ribs has been added underneath the top line. You can actually see them when you sort of turn the clubs over and take a look down there. Those ribs are going to stiffen up the top line area and the upper portion of each one of the irons. And it's allowed the designers and the engineers who worked on these clubs to basically tune them, almost like an instrument. In addition to the standard JPX 925 Hot Metal, there are also 2 other clubs, including the JPX 925 Hot Metal Pro. And as you might suspect, the Pro version is going to simply be a smaller, somewhat more compact version of the original. It has a shorter blade length, a slightly thinner top line, a little bit less offset, but all the technologies that you're going to find in the original JPX 925 Hot Metal iron should be visually appealing to slightly lower handicap players. So this iron, the JPX 925 Hot Metal Pro, could probably be considered a better player's distance iron, and it should be able to easily be mixed and matched with the standard hot metal iron. If you wanted to go, for example, with hot metal standards as your long irons and transition into the Hot Metal Pro in your scoring clubs, again, because the price is going to be identical, $150 a club, working with a good custom fitter, you should be able to do that relatively easily. Now, in addition to the standard as well as the Pro, there is also an HL version of the JPX 925 Hot Metal irons. HL stands for high launch. And Mizuno has done a couple of things with this iron. It's really designed for higher handicap golfers who struggle to get the ball up in the air, also moderate and slower swinging players who, again, struggle to get the ball airborne and to maximize out carry distance. The lofts in the Hot Metal HL are going to be 2 or 3 degrees weaker through the bag than the lofts corresponding to the same clubs in the standard as well as the pro. So for instance, while the standard loft in the hot metal and the hot metal pro for the 5-iron is going to be about 22 degrees, in the HL version, you're now up to 25 degrees. So all the HL irons should make it easier for players to get the ball up in the air. Now, because players like that oftentimes struggle with consistency and squaring up the club face on impact, the HL model has the most offset of any of the JPX 925 irons. It has the thickest top line. It also has the widest sole from front to back, and it has the largest blade length. So this is going to be the most forgiving version of the JPX 925 irons. But for players who are struggling with consistency, who have a higher handicap and are looking for a lot more height on their shots, the HL is definitely going to be an option to think about. That was heavy. Ball still gets up really easy. Really goes. That's really heavy, but that's the flight I'd love to see. That's the first one that's drifted out to the right. Love that. Absolutely love it. Okay, so after 6 shots hitting with the standard JPX 925 hot metal iron, the apex of those 6 shots was 94, 103, 102, 117, 96, 100. So we're floating in that range right there. So now I'm going to try the hot metal pro and see what difference in distance and trajectory I'm going to get with that. Still no trouble getting the ball up in the air. Certainly straighter. Very thin. That wind's pushing it. That one felt dynamite. That was the best strike of the day. I flipped a little at the bottom, but boy, it feels fantastic. So I'm looking at the launch monitor information with regard to distance. 163, 160, 160, 171, 160. Caught a hot one there with 183 and then 165. So relatively consistent with that. If I then take a look at shot apex, we're looking at 93 and then 75, because that was the one that was thin. 108, 130, another thin one at 87, 132, 102. So if we average all that stuff together and account for some pilot error, I think that we're probably floating right around the same apex, maybe just a touch higher. Okay, so we now have the HL. Right away you're going to notice that it has a thicker line going from the Pro to the HL. The top line thickness has increased, the amount of offset is definitely increased, and it's going to be important for me to remember that not only is this club going to probably go left or be predisposed to go a little bit more left, it has increased lofts of 2 degrees through the board. That's really how Mizuno is trying to get a higher launch condition for golfers. You're actually weakening the lofts. So these clubs being designed for players who struggle sometimes with club head speed, giving them more loft gives more carry distance, and more carry distance for those moderate and slower swinging golfers is going to translate to more overall distance. So this one isn't typically for me, but sometimes going with long irons that have a high launch can be pretty interesting. That was thin and still absolutely jumped. I think the wind is going to push it back straight. That was mashed, and boy did the ball go up in the air. Yeah, I'm not sure that these are going to be really for me. That's the best connection I've had so far. That ball went straight, the ball went high. So having hit the JPX 925 hot metal standard, as well as the Pro and the HL, here are my thoughts on these irons. Number one, I think that clearly they are meant to be mixed and blended together. There is also a JPX 925 Fly High hybrid that is again at $150 each, and there are several different versions. So players should be able to work with custom fitters and very easily create their own blended sets, which is always a great way to get the best performance for your swing and for your game. I found that the standard hot metal made it very easy to get the ball high up into the air. I found it was very forgiving. It had a very soft feel, very much felt like a traditional Mizuno iron. I thought the distance for me was pretty good. I was able to put most of my 7-iron shots out there to about 160 to 165 yards. But what I found was really interesting is that when I then also started hitting the corresponding 7-iron in the JPX 925 Hot Metal Pro, that the trajectory and the distance was almost the same. I really was hitting to about the same shot apex. The distances were compatible, and in fact, in some cases, I was getting a little bit more distance with the Pro model than I was actually getting with the standard. Now again, that could just be me and the way that the spin and the launch angles were coming off. I did find that the standard hot metal spun a little bit less for me than the Hot Metal Pro, and that is to be expected. I would consider the JPX 925 Hot Metal to be a true game improvement iron, and genuine game improvement irons generally are going to spin less than a better player's distance iron, which I definitely think that you could classify the Hot Metal Pro as being one of those. And for me, when I tried out the Hot Metal HL, it was very clear right from the jump that this was not going to be an iron for me. I don't struggle with getting the ball up in the air. If anything, I probably get a little bit steep and generate a little bit too much spin. I also found that this amount of offset for me and my 10 handicap swing was a little bit much, and I started sending some shots off to the left. My consistency was different. I also found that because these irons have lofts that are 2 or 3 degrees weaker, again, through the bag, I was losing distance. Again, these irons, for me, created higher flying shots that went less far, and that wasn't necessarily what I was looking for. But again, I am not really the model person, the target for the HL. If you're somebody who struggles with distance at a moderate and slower clubhead speed, then maximizing out your carry distance will more often than not yield more overall distance. And so then an HL model could be right up your alley. The only way to really know is to work with a good custom fitter, try all 3 models, and see which ones and which blend of these could create the best set for you. So I think that's just about everything you need to know about the Mizuno JPX 925 Hot Metal Iron family. But if you have questions you'd like me to answer, please drop them in the comment area below. I do try and monitor that comment area and answer as many questions as I can. If you have a question about Mizuno irons or irons in general, I'm also happy to help you out as best I can. It would be fantastic if you would like, comment, subscribe to this video. It always helps me out very much, and I look forward to seeing you again real soon.